Someone who claims to be an ex-Uber employee reveals all in a Reddit thread.
Xbox, Twitter, Uber,
Postmates,
Netflix, MoviePass,
Google,
eBay,
DoorDash,
Apple, Amazon, Airbnb,
The Apptrepreneur. Hey everyone, this is Kevin, the Apptrepreneur, and we all wonder sometimes what goes on in the heads of Uber. In fact, me and Dark Road Run one time joked because he was in front of the Uber headquarters. He noticed how sinister it looked. It looked like, it was almost like Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, where it's like, there it was, you can see it, but you can't go in the building. And I kind of jokingly said, behind those walls are a great mystery. Nobody ever goes in, and nobody ever comes out. I don't know if that was the exact quote from Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, but yeah, it's when you go to the Uber building, it's really creepy and eerie looking, even in the broad daylight. Like, you know it's a building, you know Uber employees work there, you know Darakar Shahi is in there, and yet no one can ever get in, and you never see anyone leaving either, or you very rarely do. It's a very unsettling building. What that has to do with this? Well, you always wonder what goes on. Well, there is someone who claims to be a former Uber employee who says that they actually do work there and they have some things they want to share with us. And we're going to discuss those things right now. However, before we talk about any of that, let's have a word from our sponsor.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, I'm Jonathan with gigworker.com, and we've been commissioned to conduct a survey by an insurance company that's getting ready to put out a new insurance product specifically for Uber and Lyft drivers. But they want to get some information from drivers that will help them tweak the insurance so it really fits our needs. So I wanted to invite you to participate in the survey because they're going to use your answers to help them design the cheapest Uber and Lyft insurance available. Not only will it be cheaper, but it will cover a lot more, like lost wages when you can't work because your car is in the shop. Think about that. So if you're an Uber or Lyft driver, would you take about 5 minutes to complete the survey? Kevin said he'll leave a link down below in the description. If you could click on that at the end of the video, that would be great.
So here we are on the Reddit forum. Now, when you click here, I used to work at Uber HQ on the driver team. My role focused on driver success. Ask me anything. And you have a bunch of questions here. Are you aware of any behind-the-scenes algorithm stuff when it comes to who gets a request? I was deactivated for a false report that I refused to service animal. Why are they investing billions in autonomous and other nonsense, which will take decades, and screwing drivers over in the meantime? They could be a profitable company if they just focus on the core business. So, here's the thing. This is a long thread. This is a very long thread, although I have to say I have read the whole thing, and I might do a future video where we read the whole thing. I think it's fascinating. There is so much about this that is great. Maybe this will be Sunday's live stream. I don't know, just going through this whole thing, what the person says. However, for a condensed version, we're going to cheat and use the Cliff Notes version from the Rideshare Guy blog. And this is why all of us Uber tubers and people who drive Uber have Harry Campbell bookmarked all the time because of information like this. I will include both article links below. And the headline is, ex-Uber employee shares what Uber HQ really thinks about drivers. Now, of course, they start this out by mentioning that the person on the Reddit does not actually confirm. Well, I'm not going to say confirm. They can't prove that they're an Uber employee. They just can't. So what do they? So we have to take all this with a grain of salt. However, from what I think this is John Ince, who's writing this article. He says, from experience, this sounds very much like Uber, and I agree. So let's look at the 7 key takeaways from this. So number 1, Uber truly does not care about drivers, despite what they say in the public. I think this is a pretty obvious one. Quote, I worked at Uber HQ in San Francisco for a little more than a year. When I joined, I had a choice between working on the rider team or the driver team. I chose the driver team because I believed that Uber was making a positive change in the world, was creating jobs and economic opportunity for disenfranchised and vulnerable people, and was constantly striving to make a good thing even better. Yeah, that's someone with a lot of hopes and dreams and great idealism. It didn't take long for me to learn that was all Uber doesn't care about drivers and goes to great lengths to find new ways to squeeze drivers even more than they already do. A big reason why I left Uber is because the executives and leadership were hypocrites and blatantly lied about the driving experience anytime they spoke in front of a crowd or a camera. Any public declarations that Uber cares about drivers and how Uber is working to make the driving experience better is a lie. Behind closed doors, decision makers were openly hostile towards the drivers. They don't care about you. They don't have your best interests in mind. They think you're expendable. They actively seek new ways to lower fares, i.e. wages, and increase Uber's share of those fares. That I can totally believe, by the way. We are still talking about how they are stealing more and more of your fare, of your surge. They keep cutting the rates for the drivers, keep increasing them for the passengers. They're squeezing us. I think that's pretty obvious. Even the guy from Chicago finally admitted that. Number 2, if you think Uber has an ulterior motive in something, you're probably right. This is a fun one. The debate at Uber around adding in-app tipping for drivers was the first eye-opening realization that Uber really doesn't care about drivers. There was tons of research done, and everything said that in-app tipping was the easiest slam dunk to improve driver earnings and sentiment. Lyft already had in-app tipping, maybe from the beginning. I can't remember. I think they did. And it was a huge differentiation in the platforms. Lyft was leaning into in-app tipping in their marketing to riders and was absolutely crushing Uber's ride acquisition and rider retention rates. The concern at Uber was that riders would be inconvenienced by in-app tipping because they might feel weird about not tipping or feel obligated to tip their driver when they didn't want to, which the execs feared could lead to a decrease in ridership. I also want to throw this out here. I suspect that another reason they didn't want to do it for so long is because to do it meant there would be an additional credit card transaction of which Uber would keep nothing of that transaction, but they'd have to pay the transaction fee. So why pay for a transaction fee that you are personally not going to be benefiting from? That's personal. Anyway, I thought it was turned on by default now, but originally it was designed as an opt-in feature intentionally to prevent as many drivers as possible from activating it, which I did notice early on when they launched it. In fact, I remember joking something about yeah, no, activate it. Of course, why wouldn't I want it activated? I guess I just don't like making money if I don't activate this thing. If the feature wasn't activated, it wouldn't show up on the rider side and therefore would spare riders from the potentially awkward situation. Uber definitely does not pocket the tips, although I found something that might suggest otherwise, but it sounds like there are still some shenanigans going on to try and prevent drivers from activating the feature. Another example of Uber favoring riders over drivers when making policies decisions. Yeah, by the way, I do think we have evidence that Uber might be stealing tips because of that, that video. That guy showed me the receipt and he had a $44 tip. Well, no, he had a $10 tip, but the rider tipped $44. So, stuff like that. 3, Uber's algorithms truly are inhumane. If you feel the experience of working for Uber is dehumanizing, that's because the way they designed the system to manage a workforce of over 2 million drivers. The truth teller writes the dispatch system and the algorithms that define it. The dispatch system, the algorithm, is designed to be ruthlessly efficient. It doesn't matter if you've been waiting around for hours, if you've been a loyal driver for years, if you've just completed a trip that took you an hour out of the way, if you've had nothing but minimum fare trips all day. The dispatch system is designed to make the most efficient match between ride requests and drivers. We know this. 4, if you think Uber customer support is a mess, it's not your imagination. Behind the scenes, it's probably worse than you think. Customer support at Uber is an absolute cluster F. It's definitely something that a company like Uber with vast amounts of resources, money and people, should be able to solve, but to give them some credit, you have to remember that Uber is a global company. They have to provide support for tens of thousands of drivers, hundreds of thousands of riders, and millions of trips every day. It's a logistical nightmare, and as of this time I left, the team was in absolute disarray. 5, there is basically no justice when dealing with Uber. This is going to be particularly relevant, I think, because this topic is how I get most of my new viewers, people who are unfairly deactivated. As for getting deactivated from the platform, you really don't have many options. You can keep trying to contact the support rep to get some help, but the support team basically doesn't exist, and what support does exist is overwhelmed by the scale of Uber's operations and can barely do anything for you based on time constraints. If I remember correctly, support reps spend just a few seconds reviewing each case before deploying some sort of canned response that may or may not have anything to do with your problem. It typically took drivers at least 5 interactions with customer support to get a relevant response, and even then the result probably won't change in your favor. So now here's an interesting one because I had never considered this. Number 6, Uber's emphasis on driverless cars is basically an acknowledgement that the company will never be able to generate enough profit to please investors and satisfy drivers. And this is the one I think I have the most to say about. Driver churn, technical term for drivers quitting, is an existential threat to Uber. Autonomous driving is the only way Uber survives in the long term. Same is true for Lyft and every other ride-hailing app worldwide. At some point, there will be no drivers willing to work for Uber, so it's a sprint to develop autonomous driving before things fall apart. Yeah, it's going to fall apart before that happens. Why are they screwing drivers in the meantime? I think it's a combination of 1, because they can, 2, because they want to, and 3, because they have to. Until the equation changes, Uber has been able to consistently cut fares and to squeeze drivers without things falling apart, which has earned the founders and investors and employees millions and billions of dollars. Why would they stop as long as that routine continues to work? Good question. Why would they stop if it continues to work? Everyone who's out there, just mentioning it, everyone who's out there, if you don't do that, they can't rely on it. Just throwing that out there. Anyway, let's see here. I don't think there is a target for where fares are dropping to, but it's not speculation that Uber and Lyft are going to keep dropping fares until they can't, which I thought they had reached that point a year and a half ago, but we're seeing them drop again. But it's not it's a process called test and iterate. You test lowering rates for a small group of people and do some math to determine if the changes will have a negative impact if you deployed to the entire market. If the math says it won't have a negative impact, they'll drop the fares for everyone. If the math says it will have a negative impact, they won't drop the fares for everyone, but they'll keep it dropped for some people. Now, I thought this was a very fascinating thing because I never even thought of the possibility that basically the autonomous cars was a kind of acknowledgement that this was not going to happen. Like, now here's the thing. I will say this. I think they can make this business work. Like, if they worked much like the taxi industry and they charged good rates and they paid a proper fare and they did what taxi drivers did, they would have a business. It wouldn't be a national business the way it is now. Because here's the thing. If the difference between an Uber and a taxi is that an Uber is more convenient to hail, so to speak, well, then here's the problem. The problem is that people can't afford to do that all the time. People who live in New York, they don't take taxis everywhere. They can't afford to. Taxis are super, super expensive. They take a taxi once in a blue moon. And Uber does not want people to use Uber once in a while. They want them to use them every day if possible. That's Uber's whole thing. The way that they grow fast is that you give up car ownership. Now, you obviously won't attract as many riders to do that if you're charging what you need to charge for you to be profitable. So you keep it low. All the meantime, you're developing driverless cars, trying to distract the investors. See, we're working on this. We're going to be profitable, but it is an admission that under the current model, they are not profitable. So this is why I believe this person is the real deal. And then we get to 7. This is the final one. If there is a positive in all of this, it's that some people like Susan Fowler and this truth teller do, or rather did, work for Uber and were courageous enough to speak about the toxic culture there. If you've heard the term genius a-hole in regards to Uber's culture, I think that's about as short and sweet as you could make it. Although the genius part of that is debatable. There were lots of unbelievably stupid people who worked at Uber. I believe that. Basically, the people who got ahead, promotions, and reaped a majority of the rewards, pay increases, bonuses, stock options, were the people with the worst behavior. Throwing people under the bus was seen as a good thing. Taking credit for other people's work was seen as a good thing. Hoarding information or data that could be helpful to others and causing their failure was seen as a good thing. Helping a struggling teammate was seen as a bad thing. Giving credit to team members for their contributions to a project was seen as a bad thing. Sharing information that helped another person succeed was seen as a bad thing. Office politics was everything at Uber. The perception of being important in the form of being invited to meetings with other seemingly important people and talking loudly at those meetings, making bold claims regardless of how false those claims might be, was the ticket to success. Doing actual work was basically meaningless at Uber. Considering who Travis Kalanick is, I believe this. I could go on and on, but for someone like me who believes that reward should be given based on merit, not popularity, and believe that reward should be denied to people who lie, cheat, and steal, Uber was a terrible place to work. Totally agree. And by the way, I will hold off on this guy's final judgment on this because I want you to have a reason to go read the article yourself. So anyway, we don't know for sure if this Uber employee actually worked for Uber. It could be hogwash. I mean, this is someone who could basically have dealt with Uber for so long externally that it would be pretty easy to make up a story like, well, Uber hates you for this, Uber does this, Uber have this, and make it seem plausible. The fact that we're willing to believe it, though, kind of shows that even if it is fake, Uber's reputation is clearly not any better this year than it was 4 years ago. So, what do you guys think about this? Do you think this is the real deal? Do you think this person was making it up? I'd love to know. Comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. If you enjoy my videos, consider becoming a Patreon member. It's totally optional, of course, but even as little as $1 a month goes a long way to helping this channel run smoothly, and you get access to my Patreon's exclusive blog. Also, if gas prices are getting you a little down, check out the Get Upside app below. It's totally free, but you get cash back on every gas purchase. If you want to see more content from me that's a little different than we do here, check us out at Kevin T. Rodriguez and the Apptrepreneur Vlogs channel. And finally, if you want to talk to me or any other fellow rideshare drivers, check us out on Facebook at the Apptrepreneur Hangouts. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.